What if the most profound journey of faith led directly to the most unexpected journey of the heart? Could the dusty roads of devotion, treacherous and long, actually forge bonds more powerful than any knightly oath or noble decree? During the 11th through the 15th centuries, countless souls embarked on pilgrimages across Europe and beyond, seeking salvation. Yet, some found something else entirely. Something fiercely human. Number 6. The Wayfarer's Vow Broken. The long shadow of the Pyrenees stretched behind him, a stark reminder of the miles Roric had already traversed. His cloak, once a vibrant wool, was now faded and threadbare, testament to the sun and rain of the Camino de Santiago. Roric, a knight by birth, but a pilgrim by recent choice, had begun this journey from the northern reaches of Francia, a penance for past indiscretions, a vow of celibacy weighing heavily on his soul. He walked with purpose, his worn boots kicking up dust on the ancient Roman roads that still served as the path to Compostela. His hand often strayed to the hilt of his short sword, a habit from years of soldiering. Though on this path most conflicts were internal, days bled into weeks. He passed through small villages, their stone houses huddled together, their inhabitants offering water and stale bread to the passing pilgrims. He slept in crowded hospices, the snoring of fellow travelers, a constant companion. The rhythmic thud of his walking staff capped with a scallop shell became the soundtrack to his solitude. He had sworn off worldly attachments, seeking only the spiritual cleansing that the journey promised. His thoughts were meant to be of the Apostle James, of redemption, of a quiet life of piety that would follow his return. Then he reached the plains of Castile. The sun beat down with relentless intensity, turning the landscape golden brown. Roric found himself sharing a section of the path with a small group of pilgrims, a family from Leon and a lone woman whose presence somehow commanded attention. She was not overtly beautiful in the courtly sense, her features strong rather than delicate, her hands calloused. Her name was Isolde, and she carried her own pack, a heavy wooden staff in her grip, walking with a steady, tireless stride that matched his own. She wore a simple dark tunic and a practical head covering that did little to hide the fierce intelligence in her dark eyes. They walked for a full day before speaking more than perfunctory greetings. Roric observed her. She helped the elderly family member of her group, offering a steadying arm, sharing her meager rations of dried fruit. She seemed to possess a quiet strength, a resilience born of hardship perhaps. When one of the family's children stumbled and scraped a knee, Isolde knelt instantly, producing a small vial of crushed herbs and clean linen from her pouch. She tended the wound with practiced, gentle movements. Roric, accustomed to the rougher healing of battlefields, watched a flicker of something new stirring within him. That evening, in a small pilgrim's refuge near a village named Carrion de las Condes, the air was cool after the day's heat. Pilgrims gathered around a sputtering fire, sharing stories and warmth. Isolde sat a little apart, mending a tear in her cloak with neat, efficient stitches. Roric found himself gravitating towards her. He spoke first, his voice rough from disuse beyond basic necessities. "Your skills with the herbs are keen." Isolde looked up, her gaze steady. "They are born of necessity. The path can be unforgiving." She did not elaborate, felt a pull to continue. He spoke of his own journey, vague mentions of a need for penance, the weight of his past. He did not confess the specific vow. Not yet. Isolde listened, her hands never still, her eyes occasionally meeting his. She spoke of her reasons for pilgrimage as well, a wish for guidance, a seeking of clarity after a period of great loss, though she did not specify what loss. Her words were few, but each carried weight. Over the next few days they fell into a rhythm of walking together. They did not always converse, sometimes simply existing in shared silence, the sounds of their footsteps and the chirping of cicadas filling the air. Roric found himself looking forward to the moments Isolde would offer a quiet observation about the landscape, or share a piece of hard cheese from her provisions. He noticed the way the sunlight caught the strands of her dark hair, when her head covering shifted the way her eyes crinkled slightly at the corners when she smiled at a passing shepherd. He found himself thinking less of his vow and more of the present of the quiet company she offered. One afternoon, a sudden fierce rainstorm descended upon them. The open plains offered no shelter. Roric, acting instinctively, pulled Isolde beneath the meager cover of a lone, gnarled olive tree, its branches sparse but offering some minimal protection. They huddled close, the rain lashing down around them, soaking through their cloaks. He could feel the warmth of her body, the subtle scent of rain and earth emanating from her clothes. In that close proximity, the unspoken connection between them became a tangible thing. He felt a shift within him, a tremor that had nothing to do with the chill of the rain. When the storm passed, leaving the earth drenched and steaming, they continued their walk, but the air between them was different. Later, by a stream as they washed the dust from their faces, Roric finally spoke of his vow, the promise he had made to remain chaste, to dedicate his life to God after this journey. He expected her to recoil, to understand. Instead, Isolde simply looked at him, her gaze unwavering. "A vow made in desperation can sometimes obscure the path meant for you," she said, her voice soft but firm. "The Lord's guidance often comes in unexpected forms." She did not argue. She did not persuade. She simply offered a perspective. Roric wrestled with her words. His entire purpose on this pilgrimage had been to fulfill that vow. Yet, with every passing day spent with Isolde, his conviction wavered. He saw in her not a distraction from his spiritual path, but perhaps an embodiment of a different kind of grace. Her quiet strength, her compassion, her resilience, these were virtues as profound as any he had sought in isolation. As they drew closer to Compostela, the numbers of pilgrims swelled. The path became a living river of humanity, all moving towards the same sacred destination. Roric and Isolde continued to walk side by side, their bond deepening with each shared sunrise, each shared meal, each silent understanding. One evening, under the vast, star-dusted sky of Galicia, they found themselves alone for a moment outside a bustling hospice. The air was filled with the distant sounds of pilgrims singing, but here, there was only quiet. Roric turned to Isolde, the words forming in his throat. He spoke of the impossible beauty he found in her quiet strength, the way she had eased the burdens of the journey, not just for him, but for others. He spoke of how his heart, once hardened by despair and solemn vows, felt lightened in her presence. He did not explicitly state his feelings as courtly poets might, but his gaze, earnest and open, conveyed everything. Isolde reached out her calloused hand, gently touching his arm. Her fingers, strong and warm, rested there for a moment, sending a jolt through him that resonated deeper than any battle wound. She did not speak. Her eyes, dark and luminous in the moonlight, simply met his. In that moment, the dust of the road, the weariness of the journey, the solemnity of his vow, all faded into insignificance. Only the quiet promise of a connection unexpected and profound remained. Number 5. A Scholar's Secret Garden. Master Alaric, a scholar of some renown from the University of Paris, regarded the winding ribbon of the Via Francigena with a mixture of academic interest and profound personal dread. His pilgrimage to Rome was not one of fervent devotion, but rather a dutiful obligation, imposed by his patron, a wealthy cardinal who wished prayers offered for his ailing health at St. Peter's. Alaric preferred the quiet solitude of his scriptorium, the smell of aged parchment and ink, the rigorous logic of Aristotle and Thomas Aquinas. He found the boisterous crowds of pilgrims, their unwashed bodies and loud chatter, a constant affront to his refined sensibilities. He traveled light, a single satchel holding a few precious texts, a quire of vellum, and his inkhorn. His clothing was simple, a scholar's plain tunic and cloak, unadorned. His spectacles, perched precariously on his nose, often slid down, requiring him to push them back with an impatient gesture. He sought out the quietest inns, often choosing to eat alone, hunched over a small, dense book of Latin verse. He rarely spoke, and when he did, his words were precise, bordering on pedantic. One evening, in a small, damp hospice, In the Lombardy region, Alaric found himself forced to share a table with a group of other pilgrims. Among them was a woman unlike any he had encountered on his journey. She was older than most of the young hopeful pilgrims, perhaps in her late 30s. Her face etched with lines of experience, but her eyes held a spark of irrepressible vitality. Her name was Eleonora, and she was a miniaturist, traveling to Rome to study the illuminated manuscripts in the Vatican Library. Her hands, though small, were dusted with pigment, and her fingernails were stained with rich blues and reds. Eleonora was speaking animatedly to a merchant about the different qualities of lapis lazuli and vermilion, her voice clear and melodious. Alaric, attempting to ignore them by burying his nose in his book, found his attention drawn. Despite himself, she spoke with passion, her gestures graceful, her knowledge of her craft evident. He who prized intellectual rigor found himself grudgingly impressed by her detailed understanding of pigments, binders, and the delicate art of illumination. The following morning, they both set out at dawn, the mist still clinging to the fields. Alaric, preferring solitude, deliberately walked at a brisk pace to outdistance the others. To his mild irritation, Eleonora, despite her smaller stature, matched his stride. After a mile of silence, she cleared her throat. "Master, Alaric, is it not true that the ancient Romans mixed their paints with egg yolk?" Alaric stopped, adjusting his spectacles. "Indeed, tempera. It was called a durable medium, though less luminous than oil." He expected the conversation to end there, a simple exchange of facts, but Eleonora continued, her voice thoughtful. "Yet the Byzantines preferred wax, and the Irish monks, their blues are unmatched. What do you believe made their pigments so vibrant, beyond the mere source of the stone surprise engaging?" He spoke of the different methods of grinding pigments, the quality of the vellum, the preparation of the surface. He found himself, for the first time in weeks, speaking of something other than the tedium of travel or the virtues of abstinence. Eleonora listened intently, offering observations and questions that demonstrated a genuine, deep understanding of her craft, not just a superficial interest. They walked together for the remainder of that day and the next. Alaric found that Eleonora possessed a unique blend of intellectual curiosity and an artistic soul. She noticed the nuances of light, the subtle shifts in color of the distant hills, the intricate patterns of moss on old stone walls. She spoke of the beauty of human hands creating beauty, of the divine spark in craftsmanship. Alaric, who had always viewed art as a lesser pursuit compared to philosophy or theology, found himself seeing the world through her eyes, a world suddenly richer, more vibrant. He began to point out details to her. Historical markers, the remnants of ancient aqueducts, the names of local flora. He found himself sharing anecdotes from ancient texts, and she in turn described how a particular shade of green was mixed, or how a gold leaf was applied with such precision. They spoke of the patience required for their respective crafts, the dedication to detail, the pursuit of perfection. One evening, during a rest in an orchard outside a small village, Alaric unrolled one of his precious quire of them. He had been attempting rather clumsily to sketch a botanical drawing, an interest he had recently begun to cultivate. Eleonora, observing his efforts, offered gentle suggestions, guiding his hand, showing him how to capture the curve of a leaf, the delicate structure of a flower petal. Her touch was light, her instructions clear. He felt a blush creep up his neck, a sensation he hadn't experienced since his youth. He found himself enjoying her presence, her proximity, the quiet intimacy of their shared endeavor. He confessed to her his anxieties about his research, a complex theological treatise he was struggling to complete. He spoke of the isolation of his academic life, the pressure to conform to rigid intellectual frameworks. Eleonora listened, and then surprisingly she offered a metaphor from her own art. "A single drop of water can muddy an entire batch of pigment, Master Alaric, but it can also reveal a hidden depth of color. Perhaps your rigid frameworks are simply waiting for a single drop of insight to reveal their true luminosity." Her words resonated with him, a simple, profound truth that somehow made sense of his academic struggles. She saw past his scholarly facade, past his pedantry, to the seeking soul beneath. He, in turn, saw past her dusty clothes and pigment-stained hands to a mind of surprising depth and a spirit of remarkable resilience. As they neared Rome, the landscape became more cultivated, more urban. The pilgrims grew more excited, their destination almost within sight. Alaric, however, felt a pang of sadness. The journey, which he had so dreaded, had become something else entirely. He looked at Eleonora, her profile sharp against the evening sky, her gaze fixed on the distant promise of the eternal city. They stood together on the Aventine Hill, looking down at the sprawling grandeur of Rome, the dome of St. Peter's a beacon in the distance. The air was filled with the murmur of voices, the clanging of bells. Alaric, usually reserved, felt an impulse to speak. He turned to Eleonora. "I have spent my life seeking knowledge in books, in dusty libraries. I have never encountered a truth as vivid, as profoundly beautiful as the understanding you have shown me on this path." Eleonora turned to him, a soft smile gracing her lips. Eyes, usually so bright with curiosity, now held a warmth that went straight to his heart. She said nothing, but she reached out and her pigment-stained hand gently took his. His fingers, usually only familiar with the quill and parchment, felt a strange comforting belonging in hers. The scholarly life, once his entire world, suddenly seemed a little less complete without the vibrant colors she had brought to it. Number 4. The Healer and the Harper's Song. The Kentish roads to Canterbury were notoriously muddy. In spring, yet Aveline found a quiet grace even in the trudging. Her leather satchel, heavy with tinctures, poultices, and dried herbs, bumped against her hip with every step. Aveline was a healer trained in the quiet ways of the forest and the careful remedies passed down through generations of women. Her pilgrimage to Canterbury was a journey of gratitude, an offering of thanks for a particularly difficult recovery. She had aided in her village. She sought neither miracles nor grand visions, only quiet reflection and the blessing of St. Thomas Becket. Her demeanor was calm, her movements precise, reflecting the patience required of her calling. She wore plain woolen clothes, practical and unassuming, her hair braided neatly beneath a linen coif. She often stopped to observe the wild plants along the roadside, murmuring their Latin names under her breath, considering their properties. Her hands, though nimble, bore the faint scars of cutting thorny plants and mixing strong remedies. One afternoon, as a light drizzle began to fall, Aveline sought shelter beneath the broad canopy of an oak tree. Already there was a man, his back resting against a sturdy trunk, his fingers plucking a soft, melancholic tune from a small harp. He was a harper, judging by his instrument and his traveling clothes worn, but of finer quality than a common laborer's. His face was obscured by the shadow of his hood, but the music he coaxed from the strings was filled with a poignant beauty that immediately captured Aveline's attention. She sat a respectful distance away, simply listening. The melody spoke of rolling hills, of unspoken longings of the transient beauty of life. When the final note faded, a profound silence settled between them, broken only by the gentle patter of rain on leaves. The harper finally lowered his instrument, lifting his head. His name was Callan, and his eyes, a surprising shade of green, held a deep sadness, yet also an undeniable spark of artistic passion. He was traveling from the West, seeking inspiration for new songs and perhaps a measure of peace from a restless spirit. He spoke of his music as a balm, a way to mend the unseen wounds of the soul. Aveline, whose work was to mend the seen wounds of the body, found a strange kinship in his words. She told him of her healing, of the intricacies of herbs, of the subtle balance of health and sickness. Callan listened with an unusual attentiveness, asking questions about the properties of plants, the wisdom of ancient remedies. He seemed to grasp the poetry in her craft, the quiet artistry of bringing comfort and healing. They continued their journey together, their pace often slower than other pilgrims, as they would pause for Callan to write down a melody inspired by a passing landscape or for Evelyn to gather a handful of rare herbs for her satchel. Kaelin, who had traveled through many lands, possessed a wealth of stories, tales of distant courts, of local legends, of human joy and sorrow. He spun them with the practiced grace of a master storyteller, his voice modulating, his words painting vivid pictures. Evelyn, whose life had been largely confined to her village and the quiet wisdom of her craft, found herself captivated by his narratives, her world expanding with each tale. In turn, Evelyn spoke of the quiet rhythms of the earth, the language of the forest, the subtle signs of illness in the body, the deep peace of watching a patient recover. Kaelin, whose life was one of constant motion and fleeting connections, found himself drawn to her groundedness, her unwavering focus on life and its preservation. He saw in her a quiet strength, a profound empathy that resonated with the emotional depth of his music. One evening they found themselves in a village where a young boy had fallen gravely ill with a fever. The local folk, desperate, sought Evelyn's aid. Having heard of her skills on the pilgrim route, Evelyn, without hesitation, set about her work. She brewed a potent, fever-reducing draught, her hands moving with quiet confidence. Kaelin, instead of waiting idly, sat near the boy's bedside, playing soft, soothing melodies on his harp. His music, gentle and calming, seemed to ease the boy's distress, helping him to rest, while Evelyn's remedies began their slow, steady work. They worked in tandem, a harmony of healing, one for the body, one for the spirit. As the boy's fever broke, and he began to stir, the gratitude of the villagers was immense. Evelyn and Kaelin shared a look across the humble room, a shared understanding of their complementary roles in bringing comfort. He recognized the profound dedication in her, and she saw the powerful, compassionate spirit in his music. Later, as they continued their walk towards Canterbury, the hedgerows thick with blossoms, Kaelin began to compose a new song. It was a melody unlike any he had played before, softer, more introspective, yet filled with a burgeoning hope. He sang of the quiet strength of the earth, of the healing touch of nature, of hands that brought comfort and voices that soothed. The lyrics, though not explicitly mentioning Evelyn, clearly spoke of her spirit, of the gentle wisdom she embodied. Evelyn listened, her heart stirring in a way she had not known it could. She recognized herself in the melody, in the profound respect it conveyed. She understood that his music was not just a performance, but a heartfelt expression of beauty, a mirror to the unseen world of emotions. He had seen her truly, seen her beyond her remedies and her practical nature. As they approached the magnificent Cathedral of Canterbury, its spires rising majestically against the horizon, the air filled with the distant pealing of bells. Pilgrims hastened their steps, their faces alight with anticipation. Evelyn and Kaelin walked a little slower, savoring the final moments of their shared journey. The road had been long, the path often challenging, but it had brought them to a place of unexpected connection. Kaelin stopped just before the cathedral gates, turning to Evelyn. His green eyes held a depth she had never encountered in another. He lifted his harp, and in the bustling pilgrim crowd he played a final, quiet chord, a single note that seemed to hang in the air. He did not speak a word, but his gaze, direct and open, conveyed a question, a hope, a tender, unspoken plea. Evelyn looked back at him, her quiet strength meeting his artistic soul. Answer was not spoken in words, but in the soft, understanding smile that curved her lips, and the gentle touch of her hand on his arm. A promise held in the space between the healer and the harper's song. Number 3. Star-crossed hearts on the King's Highway. The journey to Jerusalem was not merely a pilgrimage. It was an epic and immense, fought with peril, and immense physical challenge for Lady Isolde of Anjou. It was a penance, a desperate hope for divine absolution after a personal tragedy that had left her desolate and withdrawn. She traveled not as a common pilgrim, but with a small retinue, her noble status affording her some protection and a better mount, though the roads were equally unforgiving for all. Her silks and velvets had been exchanged for sturdy wool and linen, though her embroidered purse and the fine workmanship of her prayer book hinted at her aristocratic origins. Her heart, however, felt as barren as the desert plains she would eventually cross. Her father, a powerful count, had insisted on her presence, believing the Holy Land would heal her spirit. Isolde, cloistered and heartbroken, complied without enthusiasm. Moving through the journey in a daze, her mind occupied with grief. The party was large, joining a contingent of knights and foot soldiers traveling under the banner of a minor baron, offering collective security against bandits and hostile tribes. Among these soldiers was a man named Cale. He was a common soldier, but one of exceptional skill and quiet competence. His chainmail worn, but meticulously maintained. His face was hardened by years of service, etched with the scars of skirmishes and campaigns in distant lands. His eyes, however, held a surprising kindness, a depth that set him apart from the boisterous, often crude men he commanded. He had no illusions about glory. He merely sought to protect the pilgrims and survive the journey. His reasons for pilgrimage were his own. A silent prayer, perhaps for comrades lost, or battles fought too fiercely. Isolde, initially oblivious to all but her own sorrow, began to notice Cale during the more dangerous stretches of the journey. He was always vigilant, his gaze sweeping the horizon. When a band of outlaws attempted to ambush their party near the Byzantine borders, Cale was among the first to react, his sword a blur of steel defending the more vulnerable pilgrims with a ferocity that was both terrifying and strangely comforting. He carried himself with an innate nobility that belied his humble birth. After the skirmish, as the wounded were tended, Isolde saw Cale quietly helping a frightened elderly woman, his large calloused hand gentle as he guided her to safety. She found herself observing him more closely in the following days. He spoke little, but when he did, his words were direct and decideful. He possessed a keen understanding of the terrain, the movements of the stars, and the subtle shifts in the wind. Their paths crossed more often than might be expected. During the long, often tedious hours of travel, Cale would sometimes offer a quiet observation about the landscape or point out a rare bird in the distance, sensing her profound isolation. Isolde, accustomed to the florid compliments of courtiers, found his simple, honest remarks refreshing. She even found herself on occasion offering a small, fragile smile in response. One searing afternoon, as they traversed a parched, desolate stretch of the road through Anatolia, Isolde's horse stumbled, casting her ungracefully to the dusty ground. Her head covering slipped, revealing her unbound golden hair. Before her retinue could react, Cale was beside her, his movements swift and sure. He knelt, his hand hovering, then gently assisting her to her feet, his expression concerned but respectful. He checked her horse, spoke soothingly to the animal, and ensured she was steady before returning to his post. There was no theatricality in his actions, only genuine care. From that moment, an unspoken connection began to form. Isolde found herself seeking him out, not overtly, but through subtle glances, through lingering near the campfire where he sat with his men. She would ask her maid to fetch water for her, making sure to pass near Cale, hoping for a moment of quiet exchange. Cale, for his part, seemed to anticipate her unspoken needs. He would ensure her path was clear of large rocks, offer a small water skin during particularly dry stretches, or simply stand guard near her tent during the deepest hours of the night. Their conversations, when they occurred, were brief and often mundane, yet filled with an undercurrent of something profound. They spoke of the changing landscape, the trials of the journey, the distant prospect of Jerusalem. But within these ordinary exchanges, a silent language developed, a recognition of shared resilience, of two souls navigating a difficult world. Isolde found herself opening up just a little, sharing her apprehension about the unknown future, her quiet longing for peace. Cale listened, his presence a comforting anchor. He spoke of the stark beauty of the stars above the desert, of the solace he found in the simple act of putting one foot before the other. The social chasm between them was immense. She was a countess, he a common soldier. Any open display of affection would be unthinkable, scandalous, dangerous. Yet, in the desolate stretches of the King's Highway, under the vast indifferent sky, such distinctions seemed to fade into insignificance. Their connection was not built on titles or lands, but on something deeper, forged in the crucible of shared hardship and quiet understanding. One evening, after a particularly arduous day of travel, they camped near a wadi. The moon was full, casting an ethereal glow over the rugged terrain. Isolde, unable to sleep, walked away from the flickering campfires, seeking a moment of quiet. Cale, ever watchful, followed at a discreet distance, his presence a silent guard. She stopped near a solitary date palm, its silhouette stark against the moonlight. Cale approached his footsteps. He said nothing, simply stood beside her, his gaze also directed at the moonlit landscape. The silence between them was not empty, but filled with a profound, aching understanding. Isolde finally broke the stillness, her voice a whisper. "This journey, it has changed me." Cale nodded. "But not as I expected," she continued, turning to face him. Her gaze met his, open and vulnerable. "I sought only an end to suffering. I did not expect this." She gestured vaguely at the vast, desolate beauty around them, encompassing the journey itself, and perhaps the unexpected stirring in her own heart. Cale's eyes, usually so guarded, softened. Took a hesitant step closer, his hand reaching out, then stopping, caught between the instinct comfort and the strictures of their station. He did not speak, but his gaze, earnest and full of unspoken tenderness, conveyed a profound depth of feeling. Isolde, seeing the truth in his eyes, felt a wave of warmth spread through her, a fragile hope replacing the bitterness of grief. In that desolate, beautiful landscape, under the silent watch of the moon, two star-crossed hearts found a quiet, profound solace in each other's presence. The journey continued, but for them it had already delivered an unexpected and precious truth. Number 2. The merchant's unforeseen treasure. Thomas, a prosperous woolen merchant from London, measured his life in ledgers and bales. His pilgrimage to the shrine of Our Lady of Walsingham in Norfolk was a matter of practical piety, a thanksgiving for a successful trading season and a prayer for continued good fortune. He was a man of comfortable means, dressed in fine, sturdy broadcloth, his purse heavy, and his temper often short when faced with inefficiency or waste. He saw the world through the lens of profit and loss. Even his spiritual endeavors weighed against the balance of his soul. He traveled not alone, but with a small caravan of other merchants and their wares for the Walsingham pilgrimage route, though shorter than those to Rome or Compostela, was still susceptible to opportunistic thieves. Thomas believed in diligence, in order, in the tangible realities of life. Emotions, he thought, were liabilities best kept in check. Much like fluctuating market prices, their journey took them through the green, rolling hills of East Anglia, past sleepy villages and busy market towns. Thomas's mind was often on his business, calculating potential earnings, mentally reviewing his inventory. He was a man of routine, preferring predictability above all else. One blustery afternoon, their caravan was forced to halt near a small village due to a broken wagon wheel. The delay was exasperating for Thomas, who fretted about lost time and missed opportunities. As the carters worked to repair the wheel, Thomas, impatient, decided to stretch his legs, walking towards the edge of the village, where a small, unassuming cottage stood, its garden overflowing with flowers and herbs. A woman emerged from the cottage, her arms laden with baskets of freshly picked lavender and rosemary. She was small, of stature, her simple linen gown dusted with pollen, and a few strands of unruly auburn hair escaping her coif. Her name was Agnes, and she was a perfumer, a maker of herbal medicines and fragrant waters, known locally for her gentle touch and the sweet scents that always seemed to cling to her. Her eyes, the color of warm honey, held a quiet amusement as she observed the flustered merchant. Thomas, accustomed to the stern faces of city traders, found himself disarmed by her serene presence. A nuisance, this delay. Time is money, you see. Agnes smiled. A soft, unhurried expression. And patience, master, is a virtue. Sometimes the most valuable things are found when you least expect them. She spoke with a gentle, melodic lilt. Thomas scoffed inwardly at such an impractical sentiment, yet something in her calm demeanor held his attention. He found himself asking about her craft, about the different flowers and herbs she used. Agnes, unlike the merchants he usually dealt with, spoke with genuine passion about her work. She described the delicate process of distilling rose petals, the soothing properties of chamomile, the invigorating scent of mint. She spoke of how each plant had its own character, its own unique essence, much like people. Thomas, whose nose was usually only attuned to the quality of wool or the smell of profit, found himself inhaling the sweet, complex aromas that emanated from her baskets. He had never considered that such simple, natural things could hold such profound beauty. He found himself asking more questions, drawn in by her quiet enthusiasm and the unexpected depth of her knowledge. As the wheel was slowly repaired, Thomas found himself lingering near Agnes's cottage. He watched her work, her hands moving with a practiced grace as she sorted herbs, crushed petals, and stirred various concoctions in earthenware pots. He learned of the changing seasons and their gifts of the patience required to nurture, growth of the subtle alchemy of transforming raw nature into something fragrant and beneficial. It was a world entirely separate from his own, yet he found himself strangely captivated. Agnes, in turn, found Thomas's blunt honesty and his surprising capacity for meticulous observation intriguing. He might be a man of commerce, but he noticed the tiny details, the strength of the plants, the precision of her measurement. She saw beneath his gruff exterior a man capable of a deep appreciation for quality and order, albeit in a different sphere. One afternoon, a sudden rain shower caught them unawares. Agnes, with a quick gesture, invited Thomas into her small, fragrant cottage. Inside, the air was warm, filled with the scent of dried herbs and simmering waters. Light streamed through a small window, illuminating rows of jars, filled with colorful extracts and vials of fragrant oils. Thomas, a man who had seen grand guild halls and bustling market squares, felt an unexpected sense of peace in this humble dwelling. Agnes offered him a cup of hot herbal tea, its aroma comforting. As he drank, he spoke of his worries about his business, of the cutthroat competition, of the relentless pursuit of wealth. He found himself surprisingly unburdening himself to her, a woman he had only just met. Agnes listened patiently, her honey-colored eyes thoughtful. When he finished, she simply said, "The greatest wealth, Master Thomas, is often found not in what you acquire, but in what you share, in the peace you cultivate within yourself." Her words, so simple and yet profound, struck a chord within him. He had always believed in accumulation, intangible assets. Agnes spoke of intangible treasures, of inner peace, of the beauty found in simple things. He looked at her, surrounded by her fragrant creations, her face serene, and understood that she possessed a richness that his ledgers could never measure. As the wagon wheel was finally fixed and the caravan prepared to depart, Thomas felt a reluctance he had not anticipated. He bought a small vial of lavender water from Agnes, not for any practical purpose, but simply to have something that carried her unique essence. He held it in his hand, feeling the coolness of the glass, the faint calming scent rising from it. As he prepared to mount his horse, he turned back to Agnes, who stood at her cottage door, a quiet figure amidst the bustling caravan. He did not know what to say, how to articulate the unexpected shift in his heart, the quiet, fragrant treasure he had stumbled upon. He simply looked at her, his gaze holding an uncharacteristic softness. Agnes returned his look, her honey-colored eyes warm with a silent understanding. The farewell was unsaid, yet a deep, unexpected connection had been forged on the road to Walsingham. A love found in the pause, in the unexpected beauty of a perfumer's garden. Number 1, The Maiden of Mont Saint-Michel. Tide. a relentless churning force, was always present in the thoughts of those who approached Mont Saint-Michel. Ilara, a young woman from a quiet Norman village, carried the sound of its distant roar in her heart, even before she saw the famed abbey. Her pilgrimage was a desperate prayer, a plea for a miracle for her ailing younger brother, whose cough grew weaker with each passing winter. She walked with a quiet determination, her simple homespun dress and coarse woolen cloak offering little protection against the biting coastal winds. Her eyes, the color of a stormy sea, held a deep sorrow, yet also an unwavering hope. The journey to the isolated island monastery was perilous, depending entirely on the ebb and flow of the mighty tides that swept across the vast sandy causeway. Many pilgrims waited for the guided passage, but Alara, driven by urgency, had joined a small group intent on crossing at the earliest safe moment. As they began their carefully timed trek across the treacherous sands, the abbey rising like a stone ship on the horizon, Alara stumbled on a hidden patch of quicksand. Her heart leaped into her throat as her foot sank, the cold, wet sand grasping at her ankle. Before fear could fully take hold, a strong hand gripped her arm, pulling her firmly back onto solid ground. Her rescuer was a young man, his hands roughened by labor, his face smudged with mortar dust. He was Tristan, a stonemason by trade, one of the many skilled craftsmen constantly at work on the ongoing construction and repair of the immense abbey. Possessed a robust build, a steady gaze, and a practicality that seemed rooted in the very stones he shaped. He wore sturdy leather aprons over his tunic, and the scent of stone dust and fresh lime mortar clung to him. "Watch your step, maiden," he cautioned, his voice deep and calm. "The bay does not forgive carelessness." He did not scold, only stated a fact. Ilara, flustered but grateful, murmured her thanks. Tristan, seeing her shaken state, offered his arm to steady her for the remainder of the crossing. His touch, though impersonal, was firm and reassuring. He spoke of the tides, of the hidden currents, of the centuries of labor that had built the magnificent abbey on such an inhospitable rock. Ilara listened, captivated by his knowledge, by the quiet pride in his voice when he spoke of his craft. Once on the island, amidst the bustling throngs of pilgrims and the industrious clamor of the workshops, Alara found herself drawn to the areas where the masons worked. She watched Tristan, fascinated by the precise movements of his hammer and chisel, the way he coaxed form from raw stone. He worked with a quiet intensity, his brow furrowed in concentration, his muscles rippling under his tunic. He noticed her presence, a quiet figure observing from a respectful distance. During a midday break, Tristan offered her a piece of hard bread and cheese, sharing his simple meal. He spoke of the challenges of building on the rock, of hoisting massive stones, of carving intricate details. Alara, in turn, spoke of her village, of the fields and forests, of her little brother's illness and her desperate hope for a miracle at the shrine. She spoke with a quiet vulnerability that seemed to soften his often reserved demeanor. Tristan, whose world was one of stone and scaffolding, listened with genuine empathy. He knew the harsh realities of life, of sickness and loss, but he also believed in the power of faith, in the solace found in enduring structures, both spiritual and physical. He understood the yearning for healing that drew so many to the monastery. For the next few days, as Alara visited the chapels and offered her prayers, she often found Tristan during his brief breaks. He showed her things she would never have noticed: a tiny hidden gargoyle carved into a wall, a unique spiral staircase, a precise joint in a centuries-old archway. He spoke of the abbey, not just as a place of worship, but as a living monument to human dedication and faith, a testament to the countless hands that had shaped it over generations. He explained the intricate symbolism of certain carvings, the hidden meanings in the stained glass. One afternoon, A sudden fierce squall blew in from the sea, rattling the abbey's windows and sending pilgrims scrambling for shelter. Tristan, seeing Alara standing near an exposed courtyard, quickly guided her to a sheltered alcove, tucked away behind a massive buttress. The wind howled around them, but in their small refuge there was a surprising calm. In the quiet intimacy of the alcove, the air thick with the scent of damp stone, Alara felt a profound sense of connection to this practical, grounded man. She confessed to him her deepest fears for her brother, the crushing weight of her responsibility. Tristan listened, his gaze steady and unwavering. He did not offer empty platitudes, but a quiet, reassuring presence. He spoke of the enduring strength of the rock beneath them, of the way the abbey stood firm against every storm, a symbol of perseverance. He told her simply that hope like stone could be shaped into something unyielding. Later, as the storm subsided and the sun broke through the clouds, casting a golden light over the wet stones, Tristan led her to a precarious vantage point. He knew a narrow ledge overlooking the churning sea. The view was breathtaking, the vast expanse of water meeting the endless sky, the distant coast appearing as a faint line. It was a place of immense beauty and raw power. Alara gazed out, her heart filled with a mixture of awe and a nascent fragile hope. She felt a lightness she had not known in months, a sense of peace settling over her. She turned to Tristan, her stormy eyes now holding a glimmer of sunlight. "You have shown me wonders I would never have seen," she said, her voice soft but clear, "not just of this place, but of enduring strength." Tristan looked at her. His strong, calloused hands, accustomed to shaping stone, now seemed to possess a gentle strength. He did not speak of love in the language of poets or troubadours. He simply looked into her eyes, a silent question in his gaze, a quiet acknowledgement of the unexpected bond that had been forged between the grieving maiden and the steadfast stonemason on the enduring rock of Mont Saint-Michel. The ocean roared below. The abbey stood firm above, and in the space between them, a quiet, profound connection took root. A love found not in miracles granted, but in shared moments of strength and beauty.